Well, what a pleasure it is to be back at this library. Is this mic? I hear an echo, but you hear me all right. What a great pleasure to be back here. What a privilege. I think I speak for all of us that you, Jamie, and your team consistently provide us not only with this venue and this opportunity, but with, I think, the best and most literate and most engaged audience in America. And that makes us feel good as writers. So the title is Grabbing America by the Scruff of the Neck. It is? Yeah. I actually had to look up what scruff of the neck meant. And I can't think of two better panelists than Douglas Brinkley and Jonathan Karl. I'm not going to provide your bios. Jonathan has written 4 books, including 3 on Donald Trump. Douglas has written 400 books. He wrote one just coming over this morning. It's a biography of Disraeli. So let me actually start with you, Douglas. I heard this last night. I think in the last 6 weeks or more, I've heard this from maybe 30 different people in 30 different venues, and they're saying to me, "Are we going to get through this? Is this survivable? What's going to happen?" And so, what I have been responding, the way I've responded is to say, if you look at the long arc of American history, this is not completely unprecedented. And so I'd like to begin by asking you, walk us through a few historical analogs, if there are some, that might better situate this moment in 249 years of American history.
Wow. Hi, everybody. Glad to see you. I'd like to use the line, the point of history is to remind us that our own times aren't uniquely oppressive. And we can wake up every day feeling this is the darkest, grimmest thing happening, and then suddenly we walk out here in Rancho Mirage and you see a hummingbird and a swan, and you're looking at the mountains. So you remember there's so much beauty in life. I've talked to people having grandchildren soon, and world goes on. But what are the dark moments? I mean, we got through a civil war at quite a cost. I mean, the country divided in 2, you're getting 800,000 plus dead, all that dislocation. We're still not fully healed from the Civil War. So those were the darkest period, the 1860s. And then you could look at some lessons from the 1880s to 1900, to the advent of Theodore Roosevelt in 1901. Where you had the robber barons era, where the big benefactors of wealth seemed to be running the country. Rockefeller controlling things, Vanderbilt, Hill, Stanford. I mean, they're 8 were seen as running America. What Joe Biden is marketed in his farewell address as the oligarchs of the tech oligarchs, but they were the oligarchs of that era, and you had a reform movement by Theodore Roosevelt, who went after all of them as the rebound. Of course, World War II, anytime we're dealing with the Nazis, the Third Reich, having vengeance weapons, Wernher von Braun and his team building vengeance weapons that you could put over the English Channel and force Churchill's government underground, and you had Jewish slaves that are all died that were building these vengeance weapons. Some people feel there's a little vibration there. I don't know. I don't know if it's me or not.
It's the ominous.
Yeah, there we go. They got it. I was just saying with the vengeance weapons that they had a great acceleration on missile technology, the Third Reich. If they had another year at that, there may have been no London. And then the advent of the atomic bomb, when you look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and think that we live in a world at any moment we can go into nuclear annihilation. So it's frightening, modernity. And now with all the benefits of AI, but also the things that are causing us fear, climate change, or however you want to call it, is here. And then we seem to have lost faith in our institutions of government. Nobody polls well. Congress polls terribly. Presidents, I mean, if Biden could hit 40%, it was a good day. If Trump hits 42% by the spring here, we'd consider it pretty good. That's not John F. Kennedy winning a close election in 1960 and having 85% of the American public behind him, even after the Bay of Pigs disaster, and he's still, up there. So we're turned on ourselves. I think state and city government's working better, but this disbelief in the U.S. federal government and now young people with no history, no geography, no civics engagement, we're sending them to school, and it's scary because there's no sense of serving country. What does it mean to be honoring the Constitution? So we're living in a very hurly-burly time of fright, but you don't overcome fright with more fright. You overcome fright with a can-doism. We're going to get over this. We're going to get whatever Trumpism is. We're going to drive our way through. We're going to attack each thing Trump does in a sane way. If he does something good, we'll let it go through. So the problem right now is there's no resistance being built up to Trump because everybody's shell-shocked and weary, and it's a time to get your hope up. You don't want to be a professor like I've been forever and teach children not to have faith in the future. You guys are screwed. We blew it. Good luck, kiddos. So even if it's somewhat forced, you try to make, Woody Guthrie used to say, I'm a hope machine. You've got to keep getting young people excited about their vocations and life and what's ahead of them as the older generation is trying to navigate how we got in this mess and how do we get out of it.
But let me just push you a little bit more, Doug. The two analogies in particular, historical analogies, occur to me at this moment. One is 1829. You've had an America that's been ruled by a patrician class, mostly Virginians, a couple of Boston Brahmins, the Adamses, and then you got this roughneck Tennessean who shows up, Andrew Jackson, and is intent on starting the first real populist revolution in the United States, extending the franchise to lower class whites, of course, ending the national bank, and it is a shock not only to the political system but to the class system as it existed. The second historical analogy I'd like to push you on is 1932 or 33. Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days, a blizzard of executive actions that also took the country by the scruff of the neck. In what ways is this moment analogous, and in what ways is it different?
Those are two great examples, honestly. Do keep in mind that James Monroe could have won a third term. We call it in shorthand the era of good feelings, but Monroeism, and what he represented as the last of the founders could have gone on. It tells you with personality matters in American presidency. Andrew Jackson was bursting at the seams. He was old hickory from the Battle of New Orleans and Creek Wars, Seminole Wars, would duel and win, and, quite a figure, pop culture, folk figure by the time he got into the White House. But you're absolutely right. Jackson tried to bring more of the populist people into government and succeeded. But it came at a humanity cost. It's hard to judge which person owned slaves was a better slaveholder, right? That's the problem with all the Virginia presidents. And Jackson, if you look at Native American indigenous movements, Andrew Jackson slaughtered, genocide, true, I don't say that word lightly, a genocide of Native people with the Trail of Tears and the Indian War. Remove, dead, obliterate. So that's a spirit that I have a hard time getting around. Do I think Andrew Jackson's statue should be taken down in New Orleans? No. Or in Lafayette Park? No. But I do think that Jackson is going downward in the ratings of presidents all the time and wouldn't be talked about as much, except Donald Trump adores him. That was his first presidential crush. He won. He became
He's
president.
betrayed him for
McKinley.
Well, this now McKinley. First it was Jackson. First term he went to Hermitage in Nashville. First term it was Andrew Jackson, and now it's McKinley on tariffs. And this is
he also found out that Lincoln was a Republican. Remember that? A lot of people don't know that. Yeah.
But your point's well taken.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and good things came out of that era too with Jackson. FDR 32-33, nobody had anywhere to turn. They were putting tariffs on Hawley of 1930. Herbert Hoover couldn't seem to turn the economy. If you're running against a deep depression economy, FDR was going to win. But your point is that was revolutionary, kind of like Trump in reverse, where FDR just threw anything to the wall and see what would stick. He'd come up with a new acronym a day, some you never heard of, some failed, some are remarkable. And you see that coming with Trump in his first 100 days here. He's just throwing this, but he's doing it via executive orders, where the first 100 days of FDR, he had Congress, Senate, so he could get a lot of this legislation through. But even getting a lot of it through the Senate and Congress with the New Deal, once he won a second term in 1936, FDR, he tried to pack the Supreme Court, something Trump would like to do. He had there are 9 Supreme Court justices, and Roosevelt didn't think about it, didn't BS it. It's not a tweet for the day. He went full bore to add 6 new pro-New Deal Supreme Court justices so he could be control the government. In a way, you're seeing reflections on some of the behaviors of Trump right now. And I've talked to President Trump about FDR, and what was disappointing is the thing shows his great leadership is the Japanese internment. And that's what most historians think is the worst thing. And we were talking yesterday, Brett, about Operation Wetback with Dwight Eisenhower. Most of us that like Eisenhower cringe at Operation Wetback. On a humanitarian, it might have been a realpolitik move or something, but in a humanitarian way. But Trump loves that. So you get the feeling he's taking a lot of bad behaviors, Trump, that he thinks show machoism, show strongman tactics, without knowing a depth of what Roosevelt was trying to do with the New Deal, or thinking through who Jackson was and what he was doing. They were both really bright. Jackson proved himself through the military. FDR was Assistant Secretary of the Navy in World War I when the Secretary of Navy, Josiah Daniels, was out to lunch. Basically, FDR was running our Navy during World War I. So that kind of experience, and both Jackson and FDR would never have denounced John McCain. They never would have pretended John Kerry shouldn't have his 3 Purple Heart, Silver Star, or Bronze Star. There used to be a standard, even with rogues and rascallions, and that's all washed away right now. You can demean anybody anytime you feel like it, and it's led to our corrosion of civility in America.
Jonathan, I think you know Trump about as well as any leading journalist in America. I remember in 2016, when he won that night, he looked like the dog that caught the car.
Yeah.
I don't think he believed he was going to win. In 2024, he looked like the finger of God had touched him and anointed him. So walk us through this kind of Trump 2.0 and how he thinks of his role providentially or in the course of American history, because clearly he has a sense of himself now and a confidence that just wasn't there 8 years ago.
Look, he didn't think he was going to win in 2016. And just think of this campaign that we just got through. Trump, if he had lost, would have spent the rest of his life trying to stay out of prison. He wins, and the alternate reality is here, where he is arguably the most powerful president of our time. And I say that because he's backed up by a Supreme Court decision, which no previous president had, that essentially says if the president does it, it's not illegal. I recounted, over lunch we talked about the call. I started talking to Trump after the shooting in Butler pretty regularly. I called him up after the shooting because, I mean, it was just an unbelievably horrific event, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry what happened, and I hope you're all right. I left a message. He called me back, and then this series of calls went on. He wins, and I called him at about 7:30 in the morning the day after the election. I had not slept. I was up all night doing our coverage for ABC. And I thought I was going to leave a message just saying, congratulations. But he picked up, and I said, Mr. President-elect, congratulations. And he paused and he says, for what? For what, Jonathan? You tell me, for what? He wanted to hear me say it. It's like, have you guys seen Breaking Bad? What's my name? So he comes in, I wrote extensively in Tired of Winning about trying to imagine what a Trump comeback would look like if he had succeeded. And I have this long description of a chapter called Come Retribution, which basically is what we're seeing playing out. And because I spent time listening to Trump, talking to him in some cases, there were periods of time where I was not talking to him at all, but talking to people around him and trying to, when the rest of the world had tuned him out after he had left the White House, in disgrace, a pariah. You remember, major corporations were saying, not only are we not going to support anything associated with Trump, but we are not going to donate money to any Republican who questioned the results of the 2020 election. I mean, that's where we were shortly after he left office. But he gives this speech at CPAC, and it's the speech. It got some attention because it was a very catchy line. He said, in 2016, I said, I am your voice. Today, I tell you, I am your retribution. But if you go back and you look at what he is talking about in that speech, it's basically what is playing out now. The mass purges at the FBI and the Department of Justice and throughout the federal government. And he feels...
The entire CIA has been offered a buyout, in case you know.
I know.
This is true.
Yeah, this is not as Biden would say, not a joke. So look, I think that I don't think we fully can comprehend how different this is. First of all, by the way, you mentioned his approval rating. His approval rating right now, anyway, is higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So what people see is they see he's signing a lot of stuff. You see him with that pen, right? I mean, he's doing a lot of stuff. He's bold ideas. John Thune was asked about this idea that seemed to pop out of his out of his head when he was sitting there with Netanyahu in the Oval Office. Why don't we just take over Gaza?
So
long-term lease, kind of like the
Panama Canal.
or the old post office. That 99-year lease he had at for the Trump International Hotel. But I don't know that we've fully.
So let me ask you, because I mean, I actually, the longer the kind of the era of Trump goes on, the more psychologically interesting he is, and the harder it is to sort of dismiss him as lucky or a kind of a bully with a golden touch. The line I've come up with recently is he's an ego in search of an idea. But something tells me that may be unfair. And that there are actually a set of ideas to, how he sees the world, not just negotiating strategies, but there is a kind of regnant concept at work, both domestically and in terms of his foreign policy. Do either of you see one?
Yeah, I see that he doesn't like people of color. I mean, his father, old man Trump, we mentioned Woody Guthrie. Woody wrote a whole song about what a slumlord he was and how he wanted all Puerto Ricans, Mexicans out of any building he owned. Trump's father was arrested standing by at a Klan rally. He tends to play games with the David Dukes of the world, and in Charlottesville, he's pushed white supremacy and white power, this fear that we're becoming a non-white country, and he seized on to that. But then he's a conglomeration of a lot of us. He is us in many ways, Trump. He's P.T. Barnum, the showman. He's, the big founders of Vegas, who created Las Vegas in the desert. He's Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism. He's Strom Thurmond, Dixiecrat, George Wallace, arch segregationist. Yet there's Ross Perot's 19% of the vote in 1992, anti-NAFTA. He's kind of taken these aspects, and then one of the great American art forms that we forget a lot in postmodern literature classes is exaggeration. And he's Evel Knievel, and he'll create it, and so he's us. But it's the side of us that's not, he's over here as us. It's not Jefferson and Lincoln, and he's in another category. And it's about money, and it's about sales, it's about the transaction, it's about winning the deal.
But let me push you on that. He may or may not like people of color. People of color in unprecedented numbers have voted for Donald Trump. He won close to 50% of the Hispanic vote. No one would have predicted that, given that some of the stuff he said about Mexicans and immigrants, certainly in 2016. He won more of the Arab vote in Michigan.
I mean, better among Hispanics than any Republican candidate since the dawn of exit polls in '76. I mean,
And also, certainly with African-American men and younger African-American men, polling better and better. So there's got to be something more than that, right?
That misunderstood history. I mean, Cesar Chavez was opposed to people coming over the border. Chavez's United Farm Workers in California did not want people undocumented coming into the country. Chavez is forming a union to get union wages. But the left adopted Cesar Chavez as a later age Chavez, and people think that he wants open borders because he's a Mexican-American hero. No, Chavez is a labor leader who said we don't want undocumented people coming here. And in the African-American community, he hit on men a lot. These are men, Black America, in the post-Me Too movement, and at a time where women were coming up strong, and there is a misogyny in that community too, a love of a strong man when you're young. I went to Chicago actually looking to document this one neighborhood where Nat King Cole was from and Sam Cooke, and I got to meet, due to my guiders from the city of Chicago, to meet the hip hop artists, big ones, and they were all for Trump. And I said, how are you guys for Trump? What's the switch? And one of it is their parents' generation of the civil rights movement were about religion, Christianity, AME Church, Baptist Church. These young 20-year-olds want nothing to do. We're secular. I'm not that. And if I want nothing to do with that generation. But more to the point, they said, his enemies are our enemies. And I said, what do you mean? He's like the FBI, the Justice Department. Yeah. In other words, Trump's outlaw mug photo worked for him. He became Al Capone and marketeered it, and it helped him in a lot of communities. And then also when he was shot in Butler, where you pick on the key moment, that's a big moment in American history, because when he's there bleeding and does fight, 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 it was remarkable to watch his response in real time. People prayed for him, that my God, and nobody understood how that shooter had an open shot. We're living in an age of conspiracy theories. And on that moment, Bobby Kennedy Jr. called and then met Trump because Kennedy's father had been killed.
Elon Musk endorsed him that night.
Elon Musk endorsed him that night. And usually these endorsements don't matter, but I think Musk and Kennedy did.
Trump was already winning the election at this point. Yeah. But this was an absolute critical, and also in the way he perceived himself. I mean, he said in his inaugural, he believes he was saved by God to make America great again.
So I was basically certain Trump was going to win back in January of last year, and I never wavered in that view, including when Kamala Harris became the candidate. Trump has been uniquely lucky, Jonathan, in his opponents.
Yep.
The Democratic Party, no offense to anyone, but has been incredibly inept in its response to Trump. And one of the ways in which it was inept, in my view, was its attempt to turn him into an outlaw. 34-time convicted felon did him nothing but favors that he probably didn't deserve. If there hadn't been legal cases against him, we might be talking about President DeSantis right now. It's a different thing. So talk to us, Jonathan, about the Democratic Party as resistance, as opposition. If you're not happy with this president, what is the way to approach the presidency, and what is the way not to approach the presidency?
I had a long, interesting interview in December with John Fetterman, who has tried a path that's basically his path alone at this point among Democrats. And look, Fetterman has become the Republicans' favorite, kind of the new Joe Manchin in a way for Republicans. He was the sole Republican to vote. They just voted yesterday on Pam Bondi to be confirmed as the Attorney General. Pam Bondi, who might have otherwise actually gotten a lot of Democratic votes, but given all that has happened since her confirmation hearing, the purge of the senior ranks of the career prosecutors at DOJ, I think Democrats had pause about having another one of the president's former lawyers at the top of the Justice Department. But Fetterman's thing is we can't be screaming at every single outrage and saying, "Oh my God, look what he's doing! The democracy's over." We need to pick and choose what we're going to be outraged about, and also find places we can work with him. Now, Trump's made that very, very difficult for Democrats, but I think that Fetterman was a lone voice in articulating that. But you saw as the party reeled from the defeat. And this was not 2016, where you had an immediate resistance set in, where you had an alternative rally the day after the inauguration of resistance. This is a guy who actually did win the popular vote. It wasn't a massive landslide. It was just under 50% of the vote, but he did win the popular vote, and he won in every single one of the states where the two candidates were actually competing, and all the 7 battleground states. So Democrats come back in, and the first bill up is the Lake and Riley Act, and you suddenly have not a majority of Democrats, but a decent number of Democrats voting for it, and saying, in the kind of implicit message, some of them explicit, was, we really, can I swear? I'm sorry.
Yeah. We
fucked up with the border. I mean, and it was a disaster under President Biden, and our efforts to kind of spin it were even more disastrous. We tried to say, well, Biden on his first day in office sent an immigration bill to the Hill. He tried to do this from the beginning. Well, the bill he sent up was basically to undo everything that Donald Trump had tried to do, on the border.
Let me ask you about another aspect here, which is cultural politics. I think for a long time, Democrats thought that the great dividing lines in American life were around identity, and they played a game of identity politics. You couldn't listen to a Democrat without listening to an alphabet soup referring to LGBTQI+, AAPI, BIPOC, neologisms, like the unhoused, what we used to call homeless people, the undocumented, what we used to call illegal immigrants.
Was it pregnant persons?
Pregnant persons, birthing persons.
Birthing persons, okay.
But what Trump seemed to demonstrate is that actually the real dividing line is class. I think one of the reasons why he attracted so many Hispanic and African American voters was really because what's the dividing line is class. Historically, I grew up with a Democratic Party that stood for the working class. I, of course, was a Republican. The Democratic Party is not a working class party anymore. Do you think they can recover that, or have the parties, as they do historically, you know this well, Douglas, every so often they just kind of flip? And the Democrats today more closely resemble a kind of Christopher Shays Country Club Republican Party than than many of them would care to admit.
They're in deep trouble, the Democratic Party. They're hemorrhaging and trying to redefine themselves. There are different paths. One person to look at is Andy Beshear of Kentucky. There's some motion to him. But again, they're kind of picking early and saying, look, he's from Kentucky. How does he win the governorship in a red state? And how do you move him forward? But they've picked now South Carolina as this first litmus test, and that was done for Biden and Claiborne. Does that help in Andy Beshear? They're going to have 15 Democrats looking for the more even than 15, seeking to be the president. How do you run a show like that? I say you go all 50 states, what Howard Dean used to talk about, and get back to Iowa, forget the demographic of Iowa, play it there, play New Hampshire, play Nevada, play South Carolina. Maybe you can move Nevada first, but they're going to have to have a field like that. And if they get clustered too many that are about the same, doing the safe center, little progressive line, somebody like AOC, and I'm just picking her, but a real progressive could do damage because people are going to gravitate to her and they'll divide between the other 10 people. And what you said is, I think, the key, because I grew up in Ohio, and the political correctness gone mad has destroyed the Democratic Party. In the 60s and 70s, it was the party of fun and humor, rock and roll, free speech, civil rights. We're having fun. I went up to Madison, Wisconsin. There's no fun during the Kamala Harris campaign. It was like I couldn't find a Kamala sign anywhere. It was like a lot of.
But it was all about joy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they're trying. Exactly. They're trying to say joy, but joy's something that has to.
I think when you say your campaign is about joy, it is.
It is not about joy.
I mean, look, they're in the wilderness. I mean, we're at a point where it seems like both parties have been destroyed because the Republican Party is the Trump Party. I mean, there's nothing non-Trump to define, I don't think, right now, the Republican Party. If you dig down, there's a difference between the populist, Republicans and the, what's left of the Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, commerce, country club Republicans, as you say. But which direction do the Democrats go? I mean, there is the kind of Andy Beshear, we're going to get to the middle, and we went too far off into this identity politics, political correctness. But is that the lesson, or was the lesson that they needed to go further to the left? And the party hasn't decided which way. I mean, you can see it all in the person of Kamala Harris. Because Kamala Harris, when she ran in 2020, figured that the way to get the Democratic nomination, the way to get through that primary, was to be as far left as you could possibly be. And she endorsed all of those things that came back to haunt her. Abolishing ICE, essentially open borders. I mean, really open. I mean, Trump says it, but it's real. I mean, it was that idea at that Democratic debate in 2019, Julian Castro was the one that put it out, and most of them raised their hands. Should we basically decriminalize crossing the border illegally? In other words, it's no longer illegal to cross the border without documents. I mean, even I don't know how this would have polled. We never polled it, but taxpayer-funded transgender surgery for prisoners. How many? What percentage do you think? But she endorsed that, and then was unable to kind of unendorse it in 2024. So she had all that baggage from 2020. She gets the nomination, and that convention in Chicago was not a convention of that 2020 Democratic primary. That was a Republican convention, essentially. I mean, it was, we're going to take back patriotism. Yeah. Bernie Sanders spoke, and he was flanked by two billionaires, literally, the speaker before him and the speaker after him. The question of Gaza and having
Pritzker and who else?
Pritzker and the guy from American Express.
Okay, Ken Chenault.
Yes.
And that's not.
Yes.
But that.
But that was aside from what was said about reproductive rights in Chicago, that I felt like I could have been at a Republican convention. Besides the fact that every night had prominently featured literally Republican speakers. So I think that so what does the Democratic Party take from it? Our problem was that was a mistake. We tried to go to the middle. We had her running around with Liz Cheney in the fall, and we abandoned, we didn't go hard enough on kind of class warfare and the real, progressive ideas, or was the problem was our party was weighted down from the hangover of defund the police, open borders, and the like.
So just asking you, just for
Those are two entirely different directions.
well, and my question to you, Jonathan. I mean, I know you're a very straight reporter, but so if let's say AOC is the candidate or is on the ballot in 2028. Against J.D. Vance and I don't know who else, Laura Trump or someone.
No, seriously. Yeah.
Sounds plausible to me. What happens to the Democratic Party? Is that their McGovern suicide note, or is progressivism of her variety? Do you see that as a potential winning ticket for the party?
Well, whether or not it's the winning ticket in a general election almost 4 years from now, God only knows. But I do think it's where you may find the energy of the party going into the primaries.
Douglas.
I mean, it may be a suicide mission for the party, but I may well be. I mean, it feels like that's where the energy is going to be. I don't see a mass movement develop. With all apologies to Governor Beshear, I don't see a mass movement, developing. We need a competent, non-ideological technocrat to bring us to victory.
Douglas, one of the questions I've gotten, I've been thinking about this. FDR had his 100 days. So are we going through the first 100 days or the last 100 days? I guess the larger question is this kind of one of these inflection points in American history where there's a lot of dust in the air and all kinds of moving parts, but historically we always emerge from these collision moments and find our way? Or do you share, as I'm sure some people in this room do, a kind of a sense of foreboding, a pessimism? Like where psychologically, motivate this audience psychologically to where they should be?
Well, do you remember we used to do mainly to travel, but we used to do our inaugurals in March. Then we're in January, and we used to have the so-called honeymoon period. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. But worse than that, we saw Biden do a farewell address going after oligarchs of the tech world. Well, one of the big things Democrats had was Silicon Valley, and somehow in the Biden years, that's gone. And now they're standing there with Trump, those oligarchs, and that photo is going to be seen forever at his inaugural. And yet, Biden spends his summer, lives Thanksgiving at David Rubenstein's home, a billionaire. He just gave George Soros a medal, a billionaire. He stays with Tom Steyer in California, a billionaire. So are the Democrats going to do a soak the rich, we don't go after the billionaire oligarchs, or not? I mean, but they have a lot of them around them, and are they just blowing them off for a more, lesser donation kind of party? I think the pardoning mania was unfortunate. I kind of understood Hunter Biden's pardoning, but I think with all the other pardons going on, it now has Trump an example that he can leave and pardon anybody and anything that he wants. That's problematic. And I think already Trump's owned something new. He's the first day one president. I know I had to look, and on day one, Biden started it. On day one, Biden did 9 executive orders. Do you realize Bill Clinton did 0 executive orders on day one? Obama 0, Reagan 0, George Herbert Walker Bush 0, W 0, on and on and on.
Trump did 1 in 2017.
Trump did one. And now you're seeing Trump hundreds on day one. So we're going to be having to judge presidents on this day one. And yet this executive order, guys, is not in the Constitution. There are no executive orders in the Constitution. And I mean, George Washington did the neutrality 1 executive order. Lincoln, most presidents then didn't, or they
Lincoln
did
did one, right? What was it? It was a pretty big one.
Emancipation Proclamation.
Something about the Emancipation Proclamation.
And we call that executive order.
Not a bad one.
Yeah.
We call that executive order number 1. And then Theodore Roosevelt came in and started it, and then FDR then went in decline, and it got back hot when Barack Obama came in, wanted to get the Affordable Care Act done, did it on a partisan Democratic only vote. Mitch McConnell says never again. They shut him down. Obama's able to win a second term, but from that point on, he's an executive power president. And he survives with the Affordable Care Act. The point I'm trying to say is this executive order thing going jammed down our throats has problems with it. If you love the executive order, I love Theodore Roosevelt saving the Grand Canyon from being mined with an executive order. But if you get an executive order you don't like, it's horrible. And it is an increase in presidential power. But do remember, he tried to have a Muslim ban the first time, Trump, and the court said no. And I'm already seeing a lot of the day one executive orders hitting our judicial system. And it's going to get tied up for a long time, a lot of these. But the impression is big arenas, signing it, giant hand thing. It is a moment here of unbelievable showmanship of executive power and saying things that we don't know what's sticking and what's not sticking, and it creates an instability because nobody knows what's going on except Trump, maybe Musk.
By the way, I would just say that one of the most important groups to watch are Democratic state attorneys general, because the action is going to be in the courts.
Yeah.
But one thing I would also just say, all of this stuff which is generating massive outrage that he's done, what Elon Musk is doing with Doge, and the notices to government workers, and the firings of all those people at USAID and other agencies, all of this, Democrats have to be a little careful, because some of this is appealing to the people who voted for Donald Trump. I mean, they're cleaning out the federal bureaucracy. Who wants to be on the side of I'm not saying Trump should be doing what he's doing. I'm just saying, from a public perception point, he's cleaning house. That's what he said he was going to do. The DEI stuff, which he's been harping. I mean, he did campaign on this.
Let me ask you, Jonathan.
Now he's doing things he did not campaign on as well, by the way, which is another subject. But a lot of this that is generating the massive outrage, you may actually find is, and we'll see what the impact is. But for now, the initial actions is going to be popular.
So one traditional check on presidential power is the news media.
Yeah.
We're an industry that's in trouble.
I'm glad we only have 2 minutes left. So.
We're an industry that's in trouble with the American people. If you look at trust in institutions, I'm happy to say we in the newspaper business are doing a little bit better than you guys in the TV business. I think
is that true?
18% of Americans trust newspapers, 11% of Americans trust TV news. So there.
What about Sunday shows? They're a little higher.
Sunday shows are very high. Sunday shows with Jonathan Karl are close to 90%. Are we going to be able to do our jobs? And if so, how do we do them well? How do we keep ourselves from just sounding like an arm of the so-called resistance?
Well, so we don't have much time left, so I will say there's a huge question, many ways to answer it. But to me, the key thing is go out there and report what is going on, try to find out what's really going on behind the actions that we see play out in public, and don't act like you're taking sides, for God's sake. I thought one of the most devastating labels that Trump placed on the news media first time around was not enemy of the people, which was terrible and incendiary, but opposition party. And so many in our line of work acted like an opposition party. Trump attacked us. We get it back on. I mean, let's report what's happening. Let me borrow a phrase that Roger Ailes did when he started Fox News. We report, you decide. Or fair and balanced, both of those. And I think we need to stick to that. That's the approach that we need to take. It's going to be tough because at the Pentagon already you have Pete Hegseth is throwing NBC out of the workspace. I mean, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be tough, but we need to, stick to the facts.
We are out of time. I want to thank our incredible panelists.
Thanks, Jordan.
And I just want to say one more thing, which I neglected to say on top of Jamie and his team. I'm looking around and I'm seeing all of these magnificent staff members wearing black. They do so much to make our jobs easier and this thing run. Also, a security person in the back, thank you to them. It's a privilege to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.